The courtroom of the Galactic Council floated in the heart of a dying star. A massive sphere of glass and crystal, glowing with soft golden light, it shimmered against the endless black of space. Inside, the air pulsed with quiet tension, the sound of whispers, the hum of alien languages blending into one uneasy symphony. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the tiers of the chamber, shapes and forms from 100 worlds. Some were covered in scales that glittered like armor. Others were beings of mist and light. And at the very center of it all, under the cold gaze of the universe, stood Commander Elias Ward, the only human in the room. The last representative of Earth. His wrists were bound in silver restraints that pulsed faintly, suppressing his strength. His uniform, once dark blue and proud, was torn and scorched from battle. There was dried blood on his sleeve, dust on his face, but his eyes, a sharp, steady grey, were calm, unbroken. Above him, on a high dais, stood the council, 12 alien judges, each from a different world, each looking down with something between disgust and fear. Behind them hovered enormous holoscreens, replaying fragments of humanity's history, scenes of fire, war and madness, explosions, mushroom clouds, burning cities, soldiers screaming, children crying. Each image cut through the air like a blade. A low hissing voice broke the silence. "The record of your species is clear," said High Arbiter Velthar, a towering reptilian being covered in deep green scales. "Everywhere you go, death follows. You infect peace with conflict. You are violent, unstable, emotional. A primitive mistake of evolution." The crowd murmured in agreement, the soft sound of thousands of alien tongues whispering the same word: human. Elias said nothing. He stood as still as stone. His breathing was slow, steady. Inside, his heart pounded like a drum, but his face showed none of it. Velthar's yellow eyes narrowed. "Do you have nothing to say, human?" Elias lifted his head slightly. His lips twitched, not in fear, but in the ghost of a smile. "You will remain silent, then," Velthar growled. "So be it." The hollow behind the judge shifted again. Images of Earth flashed. Oceans boiling, forests burning, cities collapsing in smoke. Then came scenes from the last war, the Vorkan invasion, ships falling from orbit, alien and human bodies drifting through space, the destruction of Mars, the fall of the human fleet. Veltar raised a clawed hand toward the screen. "We offered your kind a chance to join the Council peacefully, but you refused. You resisted. You fought. And now billions are dead, including many of our own. You call it survival. We call it madness." The lights dimmed. A heavy silence hung in the chamber. Elias lowered his eyes for a moment, watching the faint reflection of the images on the crystal floor. The screams, the fire, the dying. He had seen it all with his own eyes. He had lost his crew, his friends, his home, and yet something inside him refused to break. Velthar's voice sliced through the quiet again. "You are weak," the alien said, his tone almost pitying now. "You bleed. You die easily. And yet you think you matter." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, soft, cruel. Elias looked up slowly. His gaze met the judge's, steady as a blade's edge. For a long moment no one spoke. The laughter died. The room seemed to shrink around them. Then Elias spoke, his voice quiet but clear enough to echo in every corner of the chamber. "We bleed," he said softly, "but we never stop fighting." Velthar froze, the other judges shifted uneasily. Even the spectators grew still, sensing something shift in the air. A strange invisible weight pressing down on the room. Elias took a step forward, the chains clinking softly against the floor. His eyes didn't leave the judges. "You think pain makes us weak," he continued. "But pain is what made us strong. Every scar, every loss, we learned from it. You've never had to fight for your existence. We have. Every single day." Velthar's claws flexed on the edge of the podium. His voice lowered, sharper now. "You are a threat to the order of the galaxy." Elias's smile deepened, slow and dangerous. "No, we're a reminder that order can fall." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Several guards stepped forward, weapons ready, but Velthar raised a hand to stop them. His slitted eyes studied the human for a long, cold moment, the way one might look at a creature that refuses to die. The lights flickered. Somewhere deep in the structure, thunder rolled, the sound of engines or perhaps distant weapon fire. No one could tell. Elias stood in the center of it all, the faint reflection of flames dancing across his face from the hollow screens. He looked small next to the towering aliens, fragile, almost breakable. And yet there was something in him that none of them could name, something ancient, something dangerous. Velthar finally spoke again, his voice quieter, uncertain. "What are you smiling at, human?" Elias met his eyes, calm and steady. "At the truth," he said. "You call us monsters, but you're the ones afraid of what we might become." The words hung in the air like a blade. No one spoke. No one moved. Only the human's faint, fearless smile remained, a small curve of defiance that seemed to echo louder than any weapon. And in that moment the council realized they had not captured a broken species. They had captured the spark of something unstoppable, something that would never kneel. And as the silence stretched, every alien in that shining hall felt it for the first time. Fear of a human. The war began not with a declaration but with silence, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. The Vorkan Empire, rulers of half the known galaxy, looked upon the blue planet called Earth and saw only weakness. To them, humans were fragile creatures of soft skin and quick tempers, a young race still crawling out of its cradle. The Vorkan saw opportunity. They sent their fleets through the black void, ships as large as mountains, each one armed with weapons that had burned worlds to ash. They expected no resistance, no real fight, only surrender. But what they found on that small world changed the galaxy forever. When the first Vorkan troops landed on Earth, they met not armies but people. Farmers, teachers, mechanics, children, all of them stood together with whatever they had, rifles, knives, even their bare hands. The Vorkan laughed at first. They called it primitive courage, the final tantrum of a doomed species. But when their first squads disappeared into the smoke of ruined cities and never came back, the laughter stopped. The humans did not run. They fought in the ruins, in the forests, under the oceans. They turned every street into a trap, every hill into a fortress. The Vorkan learned a new word in that war, a word they had never needed before. Resistance. The humans called it survival, but to the Vorkan it was chaos. Even when entire cities were burned to the ground, new fighters appeared, striking from the shadows. The Vorkan's scanners couldn't track them. Their sensors couldn't predict them. They were everywhere and nowhere. Every time a human fell, two more rose. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Vorkan bled. And they began to fear something they couldn't understand. Human persistence. Commander Elias Ward had been there from the first day. He had stood on the smoking ruins of New London, rallying survivors, his voice hoarse but steady. "We fight for Earth," he had said, his words echoing through the static of broken radios. Not for victory. For the right to exist. Those words spread faster than any weapon. Across continents and colonies, humans repeated them like a prayer. Even as the Vorkan bombarded the planet from orbit, even as the oceans boiled and the sky turned red, humanity refused to die quietly. They built weapons from scrap. They hacked alien technology with desperate brilliance. They struck where it hurt most: fuel depots, command ships, supply lines. The Vorkan soon realized this was not war. It was endurance. The humans fought not to win, but to make the Vorkan remember every inch of ground they tried to take. Months turned into years. The Vorkan grew frustrated. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, but none had ever fought like this. None had smiled through blood and pain. Their generals called the humans a plague. Their leaders called for total extermination. Yet even then, Earth would not fall. The final battle took place above the clouds, where the last human fleet waited, broken ships patched together with hope and madness. Elias Ward commanded the flagship Dauntless. Around him the void burned with debris and dying stars. "We hold the line," he told his crew, "for everyone still breathing down there." The Vorkan fleet outnumbered them 50 to 1. The human ships moved like ghosts between the enemy lines, firing with precision born of desperation. Explosions painted the dark with light. One by one the human ships were destroyed, but not before taking dozens of Vorkan vessels with them. The Dauntless was hit, engines burning, hull cracking open. Elias refused to retreat. He rerouted power to the forward cannons, eyes locked on the Vorkan command ship. "Fire everything we have," he ordered. The Dauntless unleashed its final barrage, a storm of light that cut through the enemy flagship's shields and tore it apart. For one moment, humanity roared louder than the stars, and then silence. The Dauntless drifted into darkness, its power gone. The surviving Vorkan ships surrounded it, capturing Elias and what remained of his crew. They didn't kill him. They wanted a symbol, a trophy, a human who had dared to fight back. They called him the last soldier of a dying world. They didn't understand that humanity wasn't dying, it was adapting. When Elias was taken away in chains, he looked down at Earth one last time through the viewport. The planet was scarred, broken, half in shadow, but light still burned in the night. Tiny flickers across continents, survivors, fighters, hope. He smiled, knowing the truth the Vorkan could never grasp. You can destroy cities, but not courage. And somewhere on that wounded world, new voices were rising, whispering the same words he had spoken years before. We fight for Earth. The Vorkan had come to conquer a world, but instead they had awakened a species that refused to kneel. They thought the war was over, but for humanity, it had only just begun. The void was silent when the human fleet died. The wreckage of ships drifted like ghosts among the stars, their broken hulls glowing faintly from the fires that refused to die. Commander Elias Ward floated in the ruins aboard what remained of his ship, the Dauntless. Sparks rained from the ceiling as alarms screamed a dying song. The air was thick with smoke and blood. His crew, what was left of them, moved like shadows through the wreck, trying to hold the ship together even as it tore apart. "Captain, we've lost engine control," one voice said through static. "Shields are gone. Weapons offline." Elias didn't answer. He stood before the cracked viewport, watching as the Vorkan fleet closed in, a sea of steel and flame. The stars were fading behind them, swallowed by the Empire's darkness. He whispered quietly, almost to himself, "So this is how it ends." But deep down he didn't believe it. Humans never believed in endings. The ship shuddered violently as something struck it, a beam of white energy that ripped through the lower decks. Bodies were thrown into the air. The lights died, leaving only the red glow of emergency beacons. The Dauntless was finished. "Eject the escape pods," Elias ordered, voice steady despite the chaos. "Get whoever's left off this ship." "And you, sir?" a lieutenant asked, voice breaking. Elias gave a faint smile, that same human smile that carried defiance even in despair. "Someone has to make sure they remember us." Moments later, the final blast tore through the ship. The bridge disintegrated in a storm of light, and darkness swallowed everything. When Elias opened his eyes again, there was no sound, no air, only the cold pull of space. A Vorkan cruiser loomed before him, tractor beams wrapping around his drifting body like invisible chains. He didn't resist as they pulled him inside. He had fought enough. Now came the next battle, the quiet one. The cell they threw him into was small, made of black metal that shimmered faintly, designed to suppress the will and crush the spirit. To most prisoners it worked. To him it didn't. He sat on the floor staring at the flickering lights above, breathing slowly. Every breath reminded him he was still alive, and that meant the fight wasn't over. Hours passed, maybe days. The Vorkan didn't speak to him. They studied him, scanning, measuring, recording every heartbeat as if he were a dangerous animal. And maybe he was. To them, humanity was an infection, a flame that refused to go out. When the door finally opened, a tall figure entered. Commander Valthar, the same reptilian judge who would later stand above him in the council. His scales glowed faintly under the sterile light, his eyes like molten gold. "Thayukar Elias Ward," he said coldly. "Commander of the human resistance." Elias looked up, his expression calm. "Was," he corrected. "The fleet is gone." "Gone," Valthar repeated almost with satisfaction. "Your kind fought well for primitives, but your war is over. You will stand trial before the council as a warning to any who still resist." Elias tilted his head slightly. "And what will the warning say?" The alien smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "That defiance is useless, that the galaxy belongs to those strong enough to rule it." Elias met his gaze without flinching. "Then you've already lost." Valthar's smile faded. "Explain." "You think strength is power," Elias said quietly. "But strength isn't what keeps us alive. It's hope. It's love. It's the belief that something worth dying for exists. You can't conquer that. You can only fear it." For a brief second, something flickered in Valthar's eyes. Confusion, maybe even doubt, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "You will learn silence soon," he hissed, turning away. Your words will die when your world does. As the door sealed behind him, Elias closed his eyes and leaned back against the cold wall. His hands were bound, his body bruised, his ship destroyed, but inside he was still burning. He could almost hear the voices of his crew echoing in the dark, still fighting somewhere out there, still refusing to give up. He thought of Earth, broken, scarred, but alive. He thought of the lights scattered across the continents, tiny flickers of rebellion that refused to fade. And he smiled again, faint and human, a spark in the shadows. The guards who saw it later would whisper among themselves, uneasy. They said the human didn't act like a prisoner. He acted like a man waiting for something, waiting for a signal, waiting for a chance, and in a way he was. Because Elias Ward knew the truth the Vorkan would never understand. Capturing a human didn't mean victory. It only meant you'd given them a reason to fight harder. Somewhere in the endless night, others would hear of his capture. They would whisper his name. They would remember the man who had defied an empire and smiled, and that whisper would spread, from ship to ship, from colony to colony, until it became something the Vorkan feared more than any weapon. Hope. The kind of hope that no cage could hold. The kind of hope that burns quietly in the dark and waits for the moment to strike back. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered like a storm of light and glass, suspended high above the burning core of a dying sun. It was said to be the place where justice itself spoke, where the fate of species was decided in calm and reason. But today reason was gone. Today there was only fear. The gallery was filled with delegates from across the stars, their voices rising and clashing like waves. The name on every tongue was the same, human. At the center of it all, bound in silver restraints, stood Commander Elias Ward. His expression was still, his gaze unwavering as the chaos echoed around him. To the council he was a symbol, a relic of a violent race that refused to submit. To the thousands watching from across the galaxy, he was something else entirely, a mystery. "Per threat, a spark. Order!" shouted the Arbiter, striking the floor with a staff that rang like thunder. The noise died, but the tension did not. The Vorkan ambassador, a tall and armored creature with dark scales that caught the light, stepped forward. His voice was deep, cutting through the silence like a blade. "The evidence is clear," he said. "The human species is unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous. They spread like infection. They wage war on each other, and on every world they touch. They must be contained before their madness consumes the galaxy." Murmurs filled the chamber again, some of agreement, others of unease. The Elari representative, a slender being of pale light and soft voice, rose slowly. "Contained," she said, "or destroyed. Because what you speak of is not justice, it is fear. I have seen these humans. I saw them defend our colonies when no one else came. They risked their lives for strangers. Is that not worth something?" The Vorkan turned, his golden eyes narrow. "They helped you because it suited them. Their kindness is a weapon, their compassion a trick. They will betray you as they betray themselves." "You speak from pride, not truth," the Elari replied quietly. "Perhaps you fear them because they remind you of what your kind once was, alive." A wave of uneasy laughter rippled through the delegates, quickly silenced by the Arbiter's glare. From his place in the center, Elias said nothing. He listened. He watched. His eyes moved slowly across the crowd, faces of metal, of flesh, of energy, and he saw the same thing in all of them, doubt. Not all, but enough. The council was not united. That meant there was still hope. Another voice rose, sharp and mechanical, belonging to the representative of the Cryon Collective, a machine intelligence older than most stars. "The human pattern of behavior is inconsistent," it said in its cold metallic tone. "They are capable of creation and destruction in equal measure. In one cycle they will build art. In the next they will burn it. Logic cannot predict them. That is what makes them dangerous." "Unpredictable," said the Elari softly. "Or free." The chamber erupted again, a storm of voices crashing into one another. Words like monster, hero, virus, miracle filled the air. Through it all, Elias stood silent, his hands bound behind his back. The noise rolled around him, but he didn't flinch. He could feel their fear like heat against his skin, and beneath it something else, curiosity. The same curiosity that had once driven humanity to cross oceans, climb mountains, and reach for the stars. It was still here in this room, buried under layers of arrogance and control. He almost smiled. The Arbiter called for silence once more, his voice heavy with authority. "Enough," he said. "We will not descend into chaos. The fate of this creature's species will be decided by reason, not emotion." He turned toward Elias, his many eyes studying the human as though examining an artifact. "Commander Ward, you have heard their words. You may speak." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned toward him. Every breath held. Elias lifted his head. His voice was quiet, but it carried, clear and steady. "You sit here in your towers of light," he said, "and you call us dangerous because we fight. You call us unstable because we feel. You think we are weak because we die. But maybe you've forgotten what strength really means." The room shifted. The air seemed to grow heavier. "You think peace is the absence of pain," Elias continued, "but it's not. Peace is what comes after pain, after loss, after fear, after everything you thought would destroy you. That's what humans are. We break and we build again. We fall and we rise again. You call that chaos. We call it life." For a long moment, no one moved. The silence was total. Even the air seemed to stop vibrating. And then, from the farthest corner of the chamber, someone whispered, a small, fragile sound. "He's right." The Arbiter slammed his staff once more, but the echo of those two words refused to fade. Some looked at Elias with awe, others with hate, but all of them looked at him with something new, understanding. The Vulcan ambassador's claws tightened around the edge of his podium. His voice was low, venomous. "You speak well for a doomed species, human. Enjoy your words while you can. Soon you will have none left." Elias looked up at him, calm, unblinking, and then, just for a heartbeat, that faint, dangerous smile returned. The same smile that would one day haunt their dreams. The same smile that said everything he didn't have to. The war was not over, not yet, and the galaxy for the first time began to realize it. The chamber was silent, long after the echoes of Elias Ward's words faded into the air. Even the stars beyond the crystal walls seemed to hold their breath. Thousands of alien eyes were locked on the human standing at the center, chained, battered, and unbroken. The Arbiter leaned forward, his many eyes blinking in slow disbelief. "You would speak to us of life," he said coldly. "After all the death your kind has brought?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The hollow images behind him still burned with scenes of war, planets burning, ships falling, oceans boiling. But now, those same images seemed different. They weren't just destruction. They were struggle. They were survival. The faces of humans flickered across the screens, faces dirty, bleeding, terrified, and yet still standing, still fighting. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. The Vulcan ambassador broke it first. "Enough!" he hissed. "This is not a trial. It is theater. Let the sentence be carried out." The Arbiter raised a claw, but before he could speak, a voice from the crowd rose. "Let him finish." It was soft but firm. One of the Elari delegates stood, her form glowing faintly like moonlight on water. "We have heard accusation and fear. Let us now hear truth." The Arbiter hesitated, his gaze shifting back to the human. "Very well," he said at last. "Human, speak your final words." The entire chamber leaned forward. The great hall seemed to darken as Elias took one slow step forward, the sound of his chains ringing like distant thunder. His eyes swept across the gathered races, predators, scholars, machines, beings older than human history itself. He saw arrogance in some faces, pity in others, but beneath it all he saw one thing reflected everywhere: uncertainty. He drew a slow breath. "You call us weak," he began quietly, his voice steady, almost gentle. "Because we bleed, because we die, because our lives are short." His gaze lifted toward the council dais. "But that's why we fight harder. Because we have so little time, we make every moment count. We love fiercely. We dream wildly. And when someone tries to take it from us, we don't stop." The words echoed off the glass walls, filling the silence like a heartbeat. "You call us violent because we defend what we love," he went on. "Because we fight when there's no chance to win. Because we refuse to kneel." His voice grew stronger. "But that's not violence. That's will. That's what it means to be human." The Elari closed her eyes, her light flickering softly. The Vulcan ambassador's claws scraped against his podium, sparks flying. Elias looked at him then, right into those golden reptilian eyes, and smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It wasn't madness or arrogance. It was something older, deeper, something every human carried inside them. A smile born from pain and defiance, from centuries of standing back up when the universe tried to crush them. That smile unsettled the room more than any weapon could have. The Vorkan shifted uncomfortably. The machines in the gallery hummed louder, as if sensing an anomaly. The Arbiter himself looked uncertain, his many eyes flickering between fear and fascination. Elias took another step forward. "You say we're dangerous," he said softly. "You're right." His voice was almost a whisper now, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. "We're dangerous because we care, because we hope, because when everything falls apart, when the world burns and when there's nothing left but ashes, a human will look at the fire and smile." He paused, letting those words hang in the air. Then he turned his gaze to the gallery above, where thousands of alien witnesses watched in silence. "You don't understand us," he said. "You've never had to. You live in peace because someone else fought your wars. You live long lives because someone else paid the price. We are what you fear you might become if everything you love is ever taken from you." His voice dropped lower. "We are what happens when survival becomes a choice." The chamber was still. Not even the hum of the energy fields could be heard. The council had no answer. The Vorkan ambassador's throat vibrated with rage, but no words came. The Aelari lowered her head, whispering something that sounded like prayer. Elias looked around once more, taking in the sea of alien faces, and then his smile returned. Calm, quiet, almost gentle. It was the smile of a soldier who had seen the end and chosen to face it anyway. A smile that carried both sorrow and pride. A smile that said, "You can break our bodies, but not our spirit." And in that moment, the galaxy changed. No decree had been made, no sentence passed, but something in the air shifted. The aliens could feel it, the echo of that human will, that unstoppable defiance. They came expecting a beast, a monster from a dying world. Instead, they had found a mirror. The Arbiter finally spoke, his voice hollow. "Remove the prisoner." Guards approached, hesitant, as if touching him might burn. Elias didn't resist. As they took him away, his smile never faded. And when the great doors of the chamber closed behind him, the silence that followed was not victory. It was doubt. In the days to come, the delegates would argue and fight and rewrite the records, but none of them would ever forget the human's final words, nor the way he had looked at them with that quiet, knowing smile. They would dream of it, fear it, and in that fear, they would finally begin to understand what humanity truly was. The prison ship Judicator drifted in orbit above the Galactic Council's capital, a fortress of black metal and humming energy fields, surrounded by a fleet of warships. Inside its cold halls, Commander Elias Ward sat in his cell, hands bound in silver restraints that pulsed faintly with light. The air was dry, sterile, lifeless. Hours had passed since his trial, though time meant little in that empty place. He sat motionless, his back against the wall, his eyes closed as if resting. But he wasn't sleeping. He was listening, to the faint vibration in the metal beneath his feet, to the rhythm of the ship's engines, to the distant hum that didn't belong. It was coming. The guards didn't notice at first. To them it was just another night. 2 Vorkan soldiers patrolled the corridor, their armor gleaming, weapons ready. They spoke softly in their guttural language, laughing about how fragile humans were. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, then darkness. The laughter stopped. From somewhere deep within the ship came a sound like thunder, followed by another, closer this time. Explosions. The floor shook violently as alarms screamed to life. Red lights burst through the darkness, painting the halls in blood. "We're under attack!" one of the guards shouted, his voice sharp with disbelief. "By who?" The answer came in the form of gunfire. The sound of plasma bolts and metal slugs tearing through armor filled the corridors. The first guard turned toward the noise, weapon raised, too slow. A figure dropped from the ceiling vents, landing behind him. A human, dirty, scarred, eyes blazing. The guard never had time to shout. Within seconds, more figures followed. Men and women in scavenged armor, wielding mismatched weapons, moving like ghosts through the chaos. The resistance had come. Elias opened his eyes as the cell door hissed and slid open. A figure stepped inside. A woman with dark hair tied back, her face streaked with soot and blood. "Commander," she said, breathless but smiling. Took us a while to find you. Elias stared for a heartbeat, his calm breaking into quiet relief. You shouldn't be here, he said. Neither should you, she replied, cutting his restraints with a pulse knife. Let's move. They ran through the smoke-filled corridors as explosions rocked the ship. Alarms wailed. The walls glowed from the heat of energy blasts. Every step they took felt like running through the heart of a storm. The humans moved with purpose, trained, desperate, unstoppable. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were survivors who refused to surrender. They reached the hangar bay, just as the great metal doors began to seal shut. Vorkan troops flooded in, their weapons blazing. Plasma bolts ripped through the air, searing metal and flesh alike. Elias dove behind cover, grabbed a fallen rifle and returned fire. The recoil slammed into his shoulder, the sound ringing in his ears. "We need to open that bay door," shouted one of the Marines. "Manual override," Elias barked. Left control tower. The Marine sprinted across open ground, bolts of energy tearing past him. He dove, rolled, and slammed his hand down on the control pad. The hangar doors groaned, sparks flying as they began to open. Beyond them lay the void of space and freedom. But more Vorkan ships were closing in, engines burning bright in the distance. "We won't make it," the woman said, firing another shot. Elias looked at her, his eyes calm again, the same calm that had shaken the council itself. "We will," he said. "Because we have to." He stood up, rifle in hand, and stepped into the open. "Cover me!" he shouted. He moved like a man with nothing left to lose, firing shot after shot, each one hitting its mark. The humans followed his lead, pushing forward inch by inch until the last of the Vorkan fell. The hangar was a mess of smoke and fire, but the path was clear. "Go," Elias ordered. "Get to the transport." They ran for the small freighter waiting at the edge of the bay, its engines whining as they powered up. As the last of his team boarded, Elias turned for one last look at the chaos behind them. The once proud prison ship burned from within, its systems collapsing. The Vorkan fleet outside scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The freighter blasted free, cutting through the smoke and debris, diving into the black sea of space. For a moment, no one spoke. The stars stretched before them, endless and cold. Then someone laughed, soft, disbelieving laughter that quickly turned into cheers. They had done it. They had taken back one of their own. Elias stood at the viewport, watching the burning wreck of the Judicator fade into the distance. His reflection stared back at him, tired, scarred, but alive. "You came for me," he said quietly. The woman beside him smiled. "You'd have done the same," he nodded. "Always." Behind them, the crew worked in silence, reloading weapons, treating wounds, setting course for the edge of known space. They didn't know where they would go next. They didn't know if Earth still stood, or if the war could still be won. But they were free, and for the first time in a long while, the galaxy had reason to be afraid again. Elias looked out into the void, his expression calm, his lips curving into that same quiet, defiant smile, the one that had shaken empires and silenced 1,000 voices. "No one gets left behind," he whispered. And somewhere in the endless dark, the stars seemed to burn brighter. The freighter drifted through the silent dark, its hull scorched, its engines flickering. The stars ahead looked cold and endless, and behind them, the galactic capital burned faintly against the void. Commander Elias Ward stood at the forward viewport, staring into that darkness, the faint hum of the ship vibrating beneath his boots. Around him, the surviving crew worked in silence, patching wounds, fixing systems, whispering in low voices. Every one of them knew they'd just declared war on the entire galaxy. The human who had stood trial before thousands of alien races had now escaped, and his name would echo through every system by dawn. But Elias wasn't thinking about that. His mind was somewhere else, on the faces he saw in that courtroom, on the fear behind their arrogance and the realization that for the first time, they had seen what humanity really was. A spark, a storm, a warning. "Commander," said the woman from before, Lieutenant Mara Vance, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "We managed to get the long-range transmitter online. Barely." Elias turned to her, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "Good. We need to send a message." She hesitated. "To who?" He smiled faintly. "To everyone." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Sending a wideband transmission across the galaxy meant suicide. They'd be found within hours. But no one argued. They knew their commander didn't waste words. "Patch it through," he said. Mara nodded and hurried to the console, fingers flying across the controls. Static filled the bridge, then a low hum as the transmitter aligned. Elias stepped forward, standing before the flickering holocam. For a moment, the light cast his face in pale blue shadows, highlighting the scars, the exhaustion, and something else. Fire. "This is Commander Elias Ward of Earth," he began, his voice steady, quiet, carrying weight even through the crackling static. "To the Galactic Council, and to every world that calls us monsters." The crew stopped what they were doing, listening. Even the hum of the engines seemed to fade. "You judged us," Elias continued. "You called us dangerous, unstable, too violent to exist among the stars. You said we were weak because we die easily. You said we were mistakes." He leaned closer to the recorder, his eyes burning. "You're right about one thing. We are dangerous, but not because we crave destruction. We're dangerous because we survive it, because we endure what others cannot, because no matter how many times the universe knocks us down, we stand back up." His voice rose, hard and clear. "You looked at us and saw chaos, but what you call chaos we call courage. You call us violent, but you've never had to fight for your own existence. You call us unstable, but we adapt faster than any of you ever will. You call us weak, but we smile in the face of death." He paused then, letting the silence stretch, letting the words sink into the void. "We don't seek war," he said softly. "But if war comes to us, we won't run. We never have. And if the Council decides that humanity doesn't deserve a place among the stars, then we'll make one ourselves." He straightened, shoulders squared. "This is not a threat. This is a promise. We bleed, we break, but we don't stop." He gave a small nod to Mara. "Send it." She hesitated only for a second, then pressed the command. The message shot through space, an invisible pulse racing toward every corner of the galaxy, carrying with it the voice of a human who refused to kneel. When it was done, the bridge fell silent. The transmitter sparked and went dark, overheated from the surge. Elias turned back to the stars. "They'll come for us," Mara said quietly. "They'll come for all of us." "I know," Elias replied. "Let them." Outside, the freighter drifted past a dying moon, its light casting long shadows across the hull. Somewhere beyond that, 1,000 worlds heard the message. In alien palaces and outposts, in machine networks and soldier barracks, beings of every kind stopped to listen. The voice was strange, the words simple, but the meaning burned like fire in their minds. Some felt anger. Others felt fear. A few felt something else, respect. On distant mining colonies where humans had been slaves, the workers paused, their tired eyes lifting toward the stars. On forgotten battlefields, veterans whispered the name Elias Ward, as if it were a spark of hope. On Earth, scarred, quiet, rebuilding itself, the transmission played through the static skies.